Just 1 second, and we go there. Okay. So we are recording, right? We're recording 1 second. Welcome to the second day of the STEM week. We are kindly asking you to switch off to complete your cell phone or to put it in mute. Do not have anything that can distract. So this is a live interview. So speakers can give instructions about your messages and what. If you need to leave the talk, please do it in silence without disturbing me. Okay? Leave us accountable. Thank you. Hello everyone. How are you? Thank you. Because this is a new format we are trying for the podcast of the NMSM Club. And it is worth mentioning also that the questions we are going to discuss were proposed and voted by the members of the NMSM Club. So welcome, hope you enjoyed it and of course learned something useful today. Now let me give you a little bit of context. On December of 2015, the United Nations General Assembly designated February 11th to be the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. This with the intention of claiming the importance, the role of women throughout the history of science and raising awareness of the lack of parity that exists among the careers of STEM. Is this enough? So, gender perspective is not just about having more women involved in science, but about understanding how the phenomena that we study as scientists can affect women, men, boys, and girls without exclusion. Basically, gender perspectives and the generation of information can actually change or shape our reality. So, to better understand this, I contacted two amazing women and professionals that I'm going to present now. So she is Master Yuridia Perez Vigueras, a full-time professor at the College of Liberal Arts and Communication at Arkansas State University, Querétaro. She has a master's degree in human rights and democracy from the National University of San Martín in Buenos Aires, Argentina. She has a master's degree in marketing from Tecnológico de Monterrey, Querétaro campus. She has a bachelor's degree in communication sciences from Tecnológico de Monterrey, Querétaro campus. She is a human rights activist, workshop leader, and lecturer with 10 years of experience. And she is the co-founder and spokesperson for the civil organization Colectiva Juntas, which has supported women in violent situations since 2019. And online with us from Spain, we have Professor Bárbara González. She holds a degree in biotechnology engineering from Tecnológico de Monterrey, Querétaro campus. She has a master's degree in biotechnology from the University of Glasgow and a second master's degree in renewable energies from Tecnológico de Monterrey campus. She is currently completing a PhD program in molecular biology and biomedicine at the University of the Basque Country, being part of the Immunogenetics Research Lab, where she is developing her thesis project focused on the search of biomarkers for the diagnosis of endometriosis. Her area of interest is bioinformatics and data analysis. She has been a member of ASUC faculty since 2017, and she hopes to rejoin us in person once she completes her current degree. So please let's receive them with a lot of applause. Master Yuridia, Master Bárbara, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And well, I was thinking of a good introduction for this occasion, a good reason to be here, occupying a space in STEM Week. And it's kind of simple. Recent advancements on the understanding of how organisms and the world we inhabit works comes up with unbelievable possibilities. And for that reason, many political, ethical, and ideological issues arise. One of these issues is gender perspective. It seems that women and men are socially expected to see things in a defined way. And nowadays, everyone has some concerns about what gender is or should be. But when we ask ourselves the importance of that, we can notice that gender is a criterion for organizing science, academia, political participation, and research in institutions. So to get into the subject, I will start asking, why do we say this, that gender is a social construct or a structural phenomenon? Why are we used to be comparing always men and women? You want to answer first, Master Yuridia?
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, first of all, and thank you all for coming to this interview. It's a very relevant topic for not just our days, but since forever. So what you're mentioning is quite accurate. We observe life and we organize the world based on gender perspective. And to answer the question, why do we say that it's a social construct? It's because the basis in which we organize our lives, how do we behave, the things we say, the things we study, how we view things, our perspectives, is based on parameters that have been established according to what is our sex when we're born. And there's a difference there, because one thing is how our biological differences between men and women, and then the social inequalities that are created based on that. So there's nothing wrong with differences, of course. In fact, what we're trying to do from a social perspective and from an egalitarian perspective is to reinforce that our differences exist and we should embrace them, because they don't take anything away from anyone. In fact, they enrich our societies. And we all have different functions and different ways and different roles. The problem is that those roles can limit people. And that's problematic because it sets certain boundaries upon men and women based on the body they have. And this is what becomes an issue. This is what has created differences in our society. This is what has created a system that privileges some people over the other. And the other group that has been highly unprivileged is not a minority. In fact, is half the world plus one. So it makes us wonder, what are the things that we are replicating? What are the things that we are perpetuating that are letting or that are keeping half of the world population in such limitations? So what gender, different from sex, is all the roles and these components of our identities that have been socially constructed, not naturally. They might stem in a certain way from biological differences, but in reality, they are socially built. And that's why we've seen changes in the past decades, centuries, although some of them very slowly, in the way we perceive how men and women are supposed to behave. However, this is a programming that has existed for a long time, so it's hard to deconstruct or rebuild, because we've been educated under that system. And this system not only operates in a household or in schools, but it's also on the media, and it's also on every expectation that is set upon a person based on this single component of their identity. So because of that, we tend to perceive gender as a socially built aspect. Definitely stems from other aspects of our identity, but it is something that we have created, we have endured, we have perpetuated as society. And because it has been socially built, it can always.
Okay, thank you. So, Professor Gonzalez.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, first of all, also I want to thank all of you for making this possible, for making me part of this 7th edition of STEM Week. Even from the distance, we are able to be together, which is super nice, super cool, and I am super grateful for being in this dynamic with you today. No, so I totally agree with what Professor Yuridia was mentioning. I think, well, she explained it better than anyone. I think just that something regarding comparisons, or why are we comparing? I think part of why do we compare, not going into men and women, if we just think what are comparisons or why do we make these comparisons between whatever, maybe sometimes it's just to see based on a certain reference, where are we capable of doing certain things? I mean, I don't think that necessarily comparisons are right or wrong or should not be seen like that, but what I do not understand or I get a little bit lost is when did we started to believe that comparing one with another was correctly or was something that we should be doing. No, that's kind of what I don't get it, because sometimes the variables that we're using to compare to each other are not the same and we cannot be measured in the same terms. No, so if we try to measure this type of, or we are comparing two variables that are not, like the same, it's a bit complicated when we get the outcome, no, or the results. And as these are not going to be the expected results or something that we want, we might not be getting real, or we can start seeing certain differences or highlighting differences that if Yuri already mentioned, these differences are okay, these differences are good and we should embrace them instead of looking at them as something negative or something that will bring us more trouble than just accept as the differences that we have, I think.
Thank you. Now, Judith Butler, an American philosopher, states that one does need to know history in order to make sure it does not repeat. And that one wants justice, not just for the group to which one belongs, but that any groups that suffers in a similar way. So the next question goes for what structural barriers exist for individuals of multiple marginalized identities in academia?
That's a very interesting question because although ideally we're expecting or we're thinking that in our free societies, everyone's born with the same rights and obligations, it turns out in practice, it's never like that. This is from a social sciences and humanities perspective, this is what we call intersectionality. When we say that we should observe phenomena from an intersectional perspective, is precisely observing what are these structural aspects that prevent from a person developing as another with a different identity would. For instance, when we talk about the difference or the inequalities, rather said, between men and women, what we should be observing is not only these inequalities between the genders or the sexes, but also observe what kind of women is, for example, a woman that is Black or that is non-white, or a person with a disability, or a person from the LGBT community. All of these aspects that overall compose a person's identity are not adding to the person, but rather multiplying the levels of discrimination that they might be exposed to. And on the other hand, a person that does not have those components as part of their identity, let's say a white male from the global north country, well, we might say that they have certain privileges because the world was set with certain rules, observing only this parameter of people, this dominant group. And this is not something new, or this is not something that recently has existed. Perhaps relatively recent, we've been discussing them in academia or in other political or social forums. But these structures have been there for a while now. And they have created certain circumstances that will allow people to achieve their personal or professional goals in a very different way than others. So although we want to believe that we have individual agency to make decisions upon our lives, the reality, unfortunately, is that there are certain structures that will determine how far we can go. And until we do not observe these social structures that on one hand, limits a powerless group, and on the other, privilege a powerful group, it would be impossible from an individual perspective to achieve the goals or the developments that a person might be seeking. And in order for this system to operate in the way it works, it's also heavily supported into the narratives that we tell each other, that we build as society. We've probably heard things like, well, poor people are poor because they want to, because they don't want to work, or women do not earn the same salary as men because of the career paths that they choose. But if we pay closer look into the numbers, into how society operates, everything is set so that we do not own that much power, we do not hold that much power upon our decisions as we want to believe. The decisions that we make, even in our personal choices, are determined by these structures, whether we are aware of it or not. And that's how also this system remains very powerful and very almost impossible to move, because it holds these powerful narratives, and it's supported also in the unawareness of these oppressed groups of their oppression. So the moment we are aware that many of our decisions are determined by these structures, and we start observing how do we change these structures, for instance, these mechanisms for parity, having 50% male and 50% women in different spaces. They're not gender equality per se, but they are certain tools that will require in order to open up some spaces that in other circumstances it would be impossible for them to achieve because of these structures that limits their development.
Okay, thank you so much. Professor Gonzalez.
Well, I think you explained it super cool, super nice, and super good. While I was going through this question, reading a little bit what happened in academia and what was the part or the point in which we got lost, I started to look at the school dropouts, and see in which point is where we are left behind one from the other, While I was reading, I learned that basically all the way through a primary school, secondary school, we are almost there. Like we have the same ratio of boys and girls attending school. And even it was said, like in several reports that I was reading, that women girls did better in academic topics in school and everything like that. And there were more boys falling behind courses or even years of study, or it took them longer, But there was some point, like in high school, we can say more or less, in which we started to see that these differences were more visible, And here is where it was the highest number of dropouts from both boys and girls. The difference was that boys, whenever they drop out schools, it's because they are employed somewhere. Now, it's because in their houses, they might need an extra income or something like that. And the way or the reason why they are dropping school is because they will get already a job, and they will be receiving certain compensation or will bring in money to their houses, And on the other side, when girls had to drop out school, it was because of unemployed practices that they will have to do in order so that men in their families were able to go and perform all these practices that will be compensated. So this is where we get some differences because both of them at some point need, I'm doing quotations because they don't need or shouldn't be needing to drop out school, but whenever they do so, the reasons are different, And this is where we're starting to see why, And we can start questioning why some will be getting compensated. And then from here, as this boy is already employed in a company, in a certain manufacturing work or whatever, it's easier for him to jump into the industry, or to learn other techniques that a girl inside of her house will not be able to develop as she's involved in a different environment, So these are just some of the reasons why sometimes we start seeing a certain disparity between how many people or how many women or how many males achieve the higher positions in academia or so on. And not only because of this, because then I continue reading and I saw that even in how we go for university degrees or even postgraduate studies, we still know that there are women studying in a lower number, in a lower proportion, and only specific to more developed countries. No, so there's also are other factors there that are not allowing both of us to reach to the same place or to the same positions at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Now let's go to the core question of this interview. So with this, do you think that is gender perspective a bias in the generation of information, even though when gender is not explicit stated in the research?
Absolutely. The thing is that, well, particularly when it comes to the natural sciences, sometimes we have certain instruments that will help us measure reality, and that in a way that puts certain distance between the researcher and the object of research. If we measure temperature with a thermometer, we will have that objectivity that the instrument will give us. However, the researcher is an instrument by him or herself, and the researcher is a person. And that person has a variety of factors that will influence how he or she will perceive reality. Those factors are what we call social categories that will influence your view on life. And those categories will make a person's experience unique, although we might find certain characteristics like group characteristics, for example, similar experiences among women of a certain income level, of a certain ethnicity, of a certain age. We can find those similarities as a group. However, the uniqueness of the human experience is there. And even though it is what we're pursuing here from a scientific perspective is objectivity, we might want to question what does that mean and if it's actually possible in a sense, considering that it's human beings that are conducting research. Our interests, our inquiries, how do we question a reality, how do we perceive it, and how do we measure it will always be influenced by that perspective of life that we have, which will be different if you were born a man or a woman, and moreover will be different if you're a woman of color or a white woman or an indigenous woman, if you're a rich person or a poor person. All of those things will be influencing your reality and your perspective, because the experiences that those circumstances have created will create a different view on life. And it is almost impossible to detach the researcher from that, even if we have sometimes instruments that will lead us to a more positivist reality. In the end, the interpretation of the information, what kind of information we decide to study, that is always a personal choice from the scientists. So that poses a problematic situation, and perhaps it makes us, or should lead us to question, what are the things that as society we have consciously decided to investigate? What are the things that we have put more resources, efforts, time to look into, to discover? What are those things and how gender plays a key role in those biases? I'm pretty sure that Professor Barbara will have plenty of more to discuss on that, but it definitely makes me think about how little explored the female body has been. Although again, we compose half of the population plus one, and that decision is not random. That decision responds to the interests of those who have made the decisions for decades and centuries already. And it responds to those interests that will help keep the status quo, will help preserve this system in which one part of the population is heavily privileged to the cost of the underprivileged of the other half. And we could also add other perspective of interest there and observe, well, what kind of science have we produced? There was a time in which scientifically, during the Nazi times, scientifically it was proven that Black people were less smart than white people because of the measurement of their skull. So I think that we should put everything we should question everything, even the scientific progresses that sometimes we tend to believe as universal and absolute truths. We should question them for whose knowledge is this and for what purpose.
Thank you, Professor Gonzalez.
Yes, I want to be, I don't want to take much in this answer because we still have more, another question, I think, in which I can give another example. But yes, basically, I think that our experiences and our background will always influence what we are researching, no? Even if we're talking about a girl or a woman in two different contexts, no, saying like I come, I'm studying, or I can use, for example, my experience. No, I come from Latin America. I was used to do research in Latin America, and then I come to another country in Europe where we are not searching for the same things. No, our interests might be different, and I might have another perspective, and I can have other points of view that are not considered here because might not be relevant, no, or might not be under the scope of what we consider necessary or relevant, probably because we have not been under that context and we are not aware that these factors might also be relevant, no? Also, it's super important the way that we collect information, no? And most of the times, or in most cases, if we're talking about if we want to do research on gynecological diseases or gynecological cancers or so on, and we carry out a series of surveys, not to ask to the population how do they feel, certain terms, ask specific things about their medical conditions or so on. And if we go to a specific sector that is underrepresented, but these people are not educated on the subject, they will not provide us with the information that we want, you know? Or if we're talking about certain topics that remain taboo, if I go to a population and I ask the girls about their menstrual cycles because it's relevant, because it's super important, these topics are still taboo in certain areas, no? So if we do not get certain breaking up these barriers or breaking up these topics that are not well discussed or that are not named as they should, or the way that helps us to collect information, that also creates certain bias in the way that we are collecting data. And in the end, we are just left up with very few variables to be considered in the study, and we cannot do much with that as we don't have enough statistical power and things like that, whatever you want to do, no? But yeah, everything, like the context will always be important. And I think that any research group, any university, anything, what you want to have is a diverse group of people working with you. You want biodiversity because that way you can tackle different areas and you can cover in as much part of the topic that you're researching under different perspectives. And I think that's the most valuable thing and should be always considered in all types of research, not only scientific research, but social science, but everything that we do, no?
Thank you. Now, what are some ways that gender has shaped important discoveries in history? Can you give us an example? And maybe in the case of Professor Barbara, an example of a medical or scientific study that fully excludes gender?
Of course I can, Erandi.
Okay,
It's not that I wasn't prepared, but yes, of course. No,
okay.
it's just, I'm sorry. It's just, it's what I was researching or what I was doing this, my thesis, developing my thesis, I found out that women, we were left out of clinical trials for many years, for many different treatments, for many different medicine. It was not around 1990s when people start thinking like, or considering the fact like, oh, why? What if we consider them as well? No, why do we take women as part of the clinical trials of all the new medication that, or the new treatments that we're developing, no? And the main reason why women were left out of this clinical trial has to do with the menstrual cycle. No, it's something that there's nothing that we can do to stop it. Well, we can take contraceptives. In that way, we will not have active menstrual cycles. But because of that, as many of these samples are hormone dependent or will be having the effects of hormones, we will be altering certain results that it's easier to compare amongst a male population. So that's why it was easier to be just left out, for women to be left out of all these studies. And even when they tried or they wanted to include women in the studies, they will take only those under contraceptives, or that they were taking any contraceptives, meaning that they wouldn't have a menstrual cycle. No, so they will be eliminating that variable that was causing so many noise, or so many moving up results and so on. But that's not also useful for population, because we women, we are not all of us are under contraceptives, no, or we are not taking contraceptives. So even if there's women who are being included into these studies, might not be it will not be I'm sorry, relevant or useful, no, for the rest of the population, because we do not know. So they were saying, like, we don't take women who are pregnant because it's unethical to treat or experiment in women who are expecting babies, no? And you say, like, yes, it is true. I mean, you cannot be doing any type of experiments and so on. But on the other side, you know that you have a population which is also in risk, no, and should be having or receiving treatment or any type of medication that could be helpful. And if we stop or we don't carry on certain types of trials or so on, we will never be able to provide this sector of the population with real treatments or effective treatments while they are expecting or so, no? So they were also saying, like, there's sometimes people or women who are older, in older ages, which are already in menopause, for example. They are no longer with a menstrual cycle, but their body, their physiology has changed. So it's not within the age range in which the clinical trial is running, so they are left out again from the study. No, so there are so many reasons why they do not want to include us as part of clinical trials to see what are the real effects. I think one of the most recent were the COVID vaccine, when it was just developed, that said that it was disturbing the menstrual cycle of women, or that they were having consequences and so on. Well, that was another example. Women were not included in these clinical trials for the vaccine.
Thank you, Professor Julie.
I find those type of things super interesting, because it makes us wonder what other things we don't know, women, about our health, our bodies, that we should be looking at, because nobody has studied that. I was reading the other day how the heart attacks symptoms are different from men to women. And we've been constantly socialized with the idea of the symptom of the pain in the left arm. But it turns out that that only happens to men. For women, the pain starts more like in the abdomen area. And how much we have learned to normalize women's pain. Like, I've heard stories of women that have endured a heart attack for hours, just thinking, well, it'll go away eventually.
Like when we have cramps.
Like when we have cramps and a doctor's telling you, well, it's normal. It's normal to feel pain, when it's not. It shouldn't be normalized like that. And all of these examples make me think about how little we have in mind women as a reference in so many areas, including science. When we think about scientists and how science has brought progress to our society, we barely have female references on that end. And that also occurs in politics, in economics, in business. All of these decision makers are usually men, and everything that we hear about our history is usually written by men for men, and we barely have these references. What I find very interesting from my perspective in the humanities and social sciences, and particularly communication, is how these narratives have built an entire story in our collective imagination of how women apparently have never participated in anything in throughout history and how we have built our current societies. But the thing is that we've been erased. We haven't given the proper credit, or in reality, sometimes we have not been allowed to participate of those decisions. We rarely participate in politics or social aspects, and whenever we have, it's been the result of the feminist fight and all these women that have constantly fought against the system that keeps telling them that their place is not there. So I can pretty much say that everything that we have learned so far has been influenced by this gender perspective. And the narrative that science is objective and that has brought progress for everyone equal has been a powerful narrative for us not to question, where does this come from? Why have we been excluded? And why haven't we been asking questions about what happens to women, half the population of the world? So I think that in this month, when we have the International Women's Day commemoration the following 8th of March, and recently what you were just mentioning about women and girls in science, I think those things are mechanisms very much like parity or others that have been established that need to remind us that we're still working towards a world that brings equality for everyone. We're not there yet. We've been definitely making some progress, but if we think about it, there's still so much to do. And asking those questions and constantly asking ourselves is if the knowledge that we're obtaining, if the information that we're exposed to, if the stories that they're telling us, are those things, what are those things coming from which perspective and for what purposes? And the more we question, the more we put those things into a heavier scrutiny. I think that those are the paths that can take us to a more egalitarian world.
Thank you. Now, for wrapping up this really important information you're sharing with us, how do you see the future of research changing to be more inclusive? So we may start with Professor Gonzalez.
What? Yes.
You want me to repeat the question?
No, I got it.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think before try to believe or try to build upon what comes next, we need to know what is happening right now, which is stopping people to arrive at universities. Why are students, boys and girls, dropping out of school? All these factors that are external factors that are related, directly related to all these topics, such as poverty. We're talking about the few educational opportunities that we have. All these things that are making these decisions to be made, saying like you cannot continue going, you cannot continue studying, you cannot continue working, no? So I think that's also super important, something that cannot be just left behind. And if we solve or try to improve all of these aspects which are stopping the way or making our paths to diverge somehow, I think it's super good, because it will not only help with this gender bias that we have, or this gender gap that we have in academia, in school, in the industries, or so on, but we also help other areas of society and so on, which is super important and super relevant. In the end, I would like to have a place in which we all can fit. I mean, like that we can get the chances and get the spaces and get the opportunities and get the infrastructure, where there's the know-how, where there are the resources to carry out the research, whatever we want to do. No, we know that even in science, the few or many people who is arriving there, we still have segregated, or we still know that engineering and computing is for men, and medicine and nursery and so on is for women. Why? You know, like we need to be more blend all these differences. We still need to improve all of these, because even the people who is arriving into these positions are still segmented by these areas. I don't know why. I don't know what's happening there, which is making us go from one way to another. If it has to do with a matter of choices, and this is what I like and what I would like to do, it's fine. But if it's something else behind that is forcing to take such decisions, I would not like that to be there. Like that's definitely not something desirable. And also something super important to be questioning about, why are we repeating certain patterns that we already have? No, why are we doing the things, or why are things continuing to be the way they are? I don't know. I mean, why do we still have how to say we have a salary gap? Why? I mean, if we're doing the exact same jobs, if we're doing the exact same things, why is this? Why is more difficult for women to arrive to the industry, private industries, or getting into higher positions? Why is that? No, if it's a matter of abilities, if it's a matter of resources, know-how, or so on, well, I mean, we'll still have to get prepared or whatever, no? But if it's something else, I think that it's time to start thinking and reflecting on what is happening, what are the things that the patterns that we're replicating, and to know that maybe these might not be useful, that these are already outdated, and we can break all of these ways of thinking and come with new opportunities and possibilities. And I think that having such conversations, or these conversations in spaces like these, where I think that at least I think I am surrounded and I'm teaching the future leaders, the future decision makers of different companies, of different industries, and so on, so that we can stop, all practices that are not beneficial for everyone, that we can create something that's more inclusive, but someone who knows, who is educated, who is aware, and who has a full perspective of what is happening, And I think it's by having these type of conversations with the people who are listening, that at some point, whenever they have the possibility to choose between A and B, to be objective, to be in a position that can provide with whatever is best, not to follow and to keep on following certain practices that are no longer useful or will not take us anywhere, I think.
Thank you. Professor Durin.
Thank you. Actually, I agree with what Professor Barbara just mentioned. I think he takes these key points that are crucial. We need to start breaking these gender roles, and we need to do that from every corner and from every social sphere and from every perspective, because it's not just in one single aspect of society. It's not just the education that we receive at a household or at school, but it's everywhere. It's in the workplace. It's how our streets are built, how the media replicates certain discourse that perpetuates this idea that there are certain spaces for men and certain spaces for women. And this applies for any aspect or any component of identity, and also talking about ethnicity or disability or age or any other aspects that makes up a person's identity, and that for some people results into an advantage and a privilege, and for some others into a limitation. But particularly talking about gender, I find that this is one of the most limiting barriers that have existed for women, because patriarchy is one of the oldest ancient institutions that we've ever had, this structure that has oppressed women for centuries now. And if we start thinking about, well, how can we continue reducing the damages that this creates, I would say that we need to start observing it everywhere, because it is everywhere. It is the toys that we're allowed to play with, the activities that we are allowed to do while growing up, the differences that are created for both men and women that are social but have no reason to exist, but other than that, the career pathways that we decide to take, and how the industries and the jobs are built, thinking about someone that does not have to take care of domestic labor or caregiving for children, and why domestic labor and caregiving for children or elder or sick is a burden that only women should carry. All of those things are creating the inequalities in every single space. We barely see women making decisions in any industry, in scientific institutions, in politics, in businesses. And perhaps the only place where women take decisions are the household, well, where else, right? Which is the only space that was left for us, the private place. So we need to start thinking about the progress that we have made so far, the basic rights that we fortunately nowadays we can take for granted, like voting and having a bank account and going to the university. Definitely, we're somewhere beyond the point where we started, and it's the result of this fight for our rights that throughout history many women have endured and sacrificed so much, including their lives, to achieve it. But it's not enough. It's not enough, and we still need to work our way because we're still facing, like Professor Barbara was mentioning, a gender salary gap. We're still facing the lack of opportunities. We're still facing the dangers that it results into just having a female body. And they're not the same dangers that male bodies have to face. All of these things makes us wonder that, or should help us think about what are the conditions that we are creating in order to reduce those inequalities, and where should we start doing that? And I think that we should do it at home, but we should also do it at schools and universities, and there should also be public policy regarding that. And the media, of course, plays a key role there in what kind of narratives and discourses we're exposed to, and what kind of representations do we observe in our society and in our media. All of those things need to or sum up to think of us or give us an idea of what are the expectations for our lives, depending whether we're born male or female. And the more we fight against those expectations, the more we fight to eradicate what is expected from us just for the sole reason of being born in the body that we were born at, then the more I think we can move towards a society that values people and observes people as human beings without disregarding the different experiences that each human being will have based on their different identity components. So I think that if we start looking towards that end, we have a possibility of building a world that is more just and fair for everyone.
Thank you so much. What do you think about having a round of questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
Yes. So does anyone has a question for our interviews? Please, Dennis, first.
Well, my question goes more into, well, we are seeing that nowadays it's coming, as you mentioned, we're doing some advances in this sense of gender equality, gender equity. But you also mentioned something about how media also influences our perspectives on all of these topics. And my question more so is that, do you think that as well, the different types of media that we are being exposed to, it will become harder actually to keep advancing these types of issues? Because I mean, as far as I can see, there's new ways in which there's content that's being put into people's faces, TikTok, Instagram, the news, the whole political situation that's happening right now. Like, my question is, like, do you think that it's gonna get harder? Like, all these advances that we're currently going through are basically gonna, well, it's gonna slow down more so.
That's a great question. It's a very interesting one. I do think that the current media technologies, particularly social media platforms, and how we tend to communicate nowadays through online-based technologies. At the beginning, they posed an illusion of change or more control into minorities, like shifting the power from mainstream media or legacy media towards the power of the people. But now we know that that was only an illusion, right? And we now are facing invisible and mysterious forces like the algorithm that unfortunately what they create is what we call an echo chamber. And this means that you're constantly exposed to content that the algorithm assumes that you like to listen and that you will agree. And this has led to a polarization of society in which we can no longer communicate to each other, in which we are not able or willing to listen to another perspective because we immediately think it's against us or it's our enemy. So I think that it absolutely poses a challenge in the sense that instead of bringing us together into a common place in which we can talk about things and talk about our differences and get to know each other through understanding, through empathy, we're going to the different direction. But in the end, I also think that it's not new in the sense that progress has always faced challenges. This is new and complex and it has a life of its own. However, that if we also observe the groups of resistance against that, and we observe the work that many women and men are doing towards bringing us together to a place in which we can talk about each other, and also beyond the online world, like there's a lot of places in which we can face-to-face talk to each other and reach a common understanding. I think that there are also ways in which we can resist that. What I would suggest for that, to resist that, is to be aware of how these technologies operate, how these technologies work, and what kind of content we're consuming. The more we're educated about how these technologies operate, how social media platforms influence not just our view and perspective on a variety of issues, but also how we interact with others. The more we are aware, the more we try to be informed from different sources. I think that will be an interesting way to resist and to continue towards the progress that we're seeking for.
Thank you so much.
Professor Gonzalez, do you want to add something?
I think it was covered. I think Judy is the expert on this, so I'll let her.
Thank you. Okay, now next question, please.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for this very interesting conversation. I think it's very relevant that we bring this kind of topics to, well, everywhere, but particularly to university, we should always like create some awareness in this. And my question is probably, it's more like asking for a piece of advice, and probably not only for me, but for all my colleagues also. I mean, I know there are some courses in which it can be like more explicit, the way that you cover like these kinds of topics, maybe like courses that like the one you teach or something, but like how can we bring to the class, let's say in science or whichever topic of the course, how can we bring like specific practices that you can recommend in order to bring like this gender perspective into the classroom to avoid like biases? I mean, I definitely try to keep this in mind all the time, but since, I mean, just like you said, we have grown in this field that has overtaken us for centuries. So it's difficult, probably even trying to be conscious to avoid probably like some practices that we don't even realize that are based on some gender bias. So any piece of advice and practices that we can take into the classroom?
Dr. Gonzalez, if you want to start. Thank you.
I think the world is full with allies, no? And we need allies for everything and everywhere, and we cannot get anywhere we want without having someone supporting us. I mean, it can be whoever, no, it can be a professor, it can be anyone from faculty member, from a university, whoever. No, the thing is that we definitely need these allies. And the way that we can get more and more and more allies on not only this topic, but in many, is to be informed, no, by being informed, by understanding that there are different causes, that there are many groups that are considered minorities, and so on. So that's how we can somehow help by becoming allies of this. I don't know, probably in a classroom or something like that. Try to. I was thinking probably in a project, no? If you are developing something, if you are left with a final project, well, why not trying to research about some of these topics that are not the classical ones, no? Like the classic topics that everyone will go for, try to go a little bit deeper into some diseases, I'm saying diseases because I'm a biologist, so that's what I know sometimes, and but the type of project that we do, no? But try to see things with a gender perspective, no? Thinking whether is this necessary, what are the relevances of these while you are doing a bibliographic research, see how much literature you have available for each topic, and if you don't find much of it, it's probably because it needs to be more studied, no? So contributing into those areas, that's also good. I think spreading the voice, spreading the word about all these topics, it's super important, super relevant. Probably sometimes having these uncomfortable talks is necessary, no? Saying things, it's open some dialogues where they're in a closed space or that you would need, that needs to be addressed. That's something good as well. And just keep supporting the different causes that you see. It doesn't, as I said, has to be exclusively this one. In this case, we're talking about the gender bias that we see in different areas, but there are so many others, no, that also will need to be speak up and to be bring to the table and discuss them in an open way, no, I think.
Thank you. Professor Yuridia, you want to ask something?
Yes, just to briefly add, I think that yes, let's remember that this is a system, right? It's a system and we all participate of it one way or another. It's not just like men do it or women don't. If we think about it as a system, then we all, in a way or another, we participate of it. And we're never exempt of replicating certain practices or certain discourse that might be detrimental for another group. So I would suggest that end to constantly question why we say the things we say, how we say them, be very, try to be very aware of how the type of things that we mention, especially for us as professors, we're in front of a group. And what we say might be taken very literal or might be taken as a rule. So we should be very careful with how we say things and why we say it. I would also suggest to find the bibliographies that we use, try to find female authors as well, authors from different perspectives, different backgrounds. I teach a diversity in media course if you want to enroll, that's the overview way. And overall, I think that if we are constantly, if we're constantly questioning what we say and how we say it, and we try to bring the female perspective in our the literature that we use, encourage our female students, that is a way in which we contribute to a more egalitarian atmosphere in our classrooms. And we never know how much it can impact a person. We never know how much a student might feel supported to continue with the pursuit of her goals if she gets the right support.
Thank you.
We have a question in YouTube.
Okay. Okay. Let's see read it. Thank you.
Wow.
So, Mr. Gonzalez said, what do you think holds more weight when it comes to making a difference for gender inequality in the field? To be successful in the field or to empower younger generations to follow their dreams? Or both have equal importance? You want me to?
Repeat the question again?
Okay, so what do you think holds more weight when it comes to making a difference for gender inequality in the field? To be successful in the field or to empower younger generations to follow their dreams? Or do both have equal importance?
I think both, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Like, the thing also about gender perspective is that, it seems that women will always have to choose, right? They have to choose either do this or the other, sacrifice this to do the other. And I think that, if we started to think about, which by the way, men don't have, right? So if we start observing the possibilities of doing both things, and not in the sense of becoming super women, we know that. Like, that is also something that can limit women's performance, right? Like, you have to be super mom, super scientist, super wife, super model, super, no, that's
my
not the
opinion.
case. Exactly, that's not the case. The thing is that, we should be able to do the things that we desire without having to compromise so much. And a way in which we can reduce that level of compromising is to ensure that we have a society that gives us the pathway to do so. I think that one of the greatest limits of today for women is that it becomes so hard to achieve professional goals while at the same time personal and family goals, because our system is not made for that. Like, how many hours do we have to work when it comes by law? 8 hours. That system was designed when we always had someone taking care of domestic labor. Now that both men and women work, who has time to do what, right? And we sacrifice our time for sleeping, for leisure, for enjoying quality time with our friends and family, or just like doing nothing, which is right. So if we start thinking about how can we change our ways of living, how our system needs to evolve to these changes that these values of equity are bringing, then I think we will have to make less of those choices. It will be possible to do both and to, while being successful, empowering others. Just by reaching to certain places, we're already contributing to symbolic capital of where can women go to.
Thank you. I think we have another question here. I think it's the last one, isn't it? Okay, go ahead, please.
First of all, thank you for your perspectives. They were really inspiring. My question is also related, I believe, kind of Dr. Dominguez. There is this debate right now happening in most universities in America of having gender studies as a required gender course. What would you think of having that in an institution, its relevance or importance, and specifically in this context of a STEM major?
Okay, Professor Gonzalez, if you want to start.
We were talking about general education courses.
Yes, of having gender studies as a required gender course for STEM courses.
Yes, of course, everything. Why not? Yes, I want to enroll in it as well. I think it's super important, and definitely, I think whenever any time that we talk about education system and how we all agree that it needs to be updated, and there are so many things that are not probably as useful as they were 30 or 70 years ago. Definitely having gender perspective courses, but not only that, but also having a financial education since we're kids, and also nutritionists, and learn how to eat, and also to take care of the environment and so on. All of those things I also computing since we are in kindergarten, and learning how to program. There are many things, and you can be so many things. And if we start seeing things under different perspectives, we can reach the same results, but from different backgrounds, and we can find things more useful. And that way, any type of studies that we do are better performed, and we can enjoy them more. But definitely, yes, I mean, gender perspective should be super important, as well as others that I was mentioning. And I just want to give, well, I hope that the question was answered. And regarding the previous question, where Professor Yuridia was mentioning about the super women and so on, there is this, I don't know if you know, but the bank BBVA, the Bancomer, the one that we should call BBVA, has a series of conferences in YouTube, which are free, so you can watch them. And there is one, a very nice one from Julieta Fierro, which is physicist, astronomer, I don't know, she's many things, but one of the things is that she talks about how professionists or female professionists, we need to prove that we are super in everything. And the reality is that we don't, because we already are. No, and not because I want to say like, yes, we are, no, but by being where we are, by doing all the things that we are doing and so on, we are already fulfilling all of these characteristics that a superwoman should look like, or what a super is. No, so rather go step by step, try to follow your own path. And even she said, like, today, to be here, I didn't have time to do my bed and wash dishes, and guess what, everything was okay. I mean, the next day when I arrived, I did my bed, I washed my dishes, and guess what, everything was okay. No, so all this pressure we put sometimes into each other, it's just a mental burden that comes out of nowhere but our brains, and we don't need it. And we don't need to be overloading our brains and our activities and our calendars with so many things that, if you put into perspective, they can wait. No, and if we want to focus into a career path, a project, a school assignment, or whatever, we can do it. No, because if we complete that assignment, we're already there. We are already a superwoman. So we don't have to be adding other things to that, because in other perspectives or in other environments, many other people would not be caring whether or not they wash the dishes in the morning or something like that. So I do really recommend it. It's in YouTube, as I said. It's called, wait, let me see. It's by, I lost it, I'm sorry. If you search like that, Julieta Fierro BBVA, la ciencia nos demuestra que no tenemos la verdad. I think it's very good. There are so many of different people who are invited to these small talks, and are very, very interesting as well.
Thank you so much. Well, Master Yuridia, Master Gonzalez, thank you so much for your time, for being part of this special episode of the podcast. Thank you so much you for being here. Hope you enjoy it, and well, have a great week.
Yay.
Okay, so we'll start in 15 minutes. And if you want to stay.
Hey, hello, Karime. Ah.